Hello everybody and welcome to the British Pint. My name is Christoph and today we are tasting and I give you the recipe for a very special brew that I made for a friend's birthday, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be as good as I wanted to, so I didn't do a video of the brew day, but it has turned out so great. I really want to do a video about this. It's a clone of the Belhaven's Best traditional ale that is, I think it was formerly known as 70 shillings, 3.2% ABV, so really low, one of those northern bitters that are really low in alcohol content. Very slim, clean, easy to drink. And they are served with a sparkler. And I think if everything went well, you saw that in the video in the introduction of this movie. I still have, after setting up everything, a good centimeter of foam in here. Foam is extraordinarily stable for something that is only 3.2% ABV. And so I want to tell you the recipe. It is also one of the few beers that turned out really well, just as intended, in a very short time. So I brewed this 3 weeks before my friend's birthday, and the reason for that was that I was ill for a week. Otherwise I would have given myself 4 weeks, because 3 weeks is very, very short. And it wasn't perfectly clear, and just a week later the yeast had settled out perfectly. Now it's crystal clear. I'm not sure if you can see this really well, but it's practically transparent. It's really nice. If I look from below I can see the foam and everything. It might be very slight chill haze, as all my beers tend to have when I don't do any protein rests. But compared to other beers where I had yeasts in the suspension for a long time, this is just amazing. So let's start with the simple stuff. Grain bill, hops. What did I do? I'm not sure where I read it, but I think somewhere it said 10% crystal malt is the way to go forward, and I also used 1% of black malt to get the color right, and so we end up with 89% of Golden Promise, a Scottish barley variety that I love to use, and that's basically your grain bill already. You can scale that for 80-degree Platos, which will give you 3.2% ABV with most yeasts. So that's the simple part. Then hopping. I know that in my Real Ale Almanac they do give some ideas about the hopping. They say bitterness is Whitbread Golding variety. I used Bramling Cross, just something that is typically British and has a middle amount of alpha acids, around 6%, so that you get a clean, nice bitterness. 24 IBU I think is what I aim for, and then 25 EBC is the color. Then you have the bitterness. I boiled it for 60 minutes, added the Browning Cross, and then in the last 10 minutes for aroma I used East Kent Golding and Fuggles, but more Fuggles, 2:1 ratio, and just pumped that in an amount that I think would give me a good flavor. And it's quite noticeable. A bit of fruitiness from the East Kent Golding, lots of grassy spiciness from the Fuggles. That is exactly what I like to have in this beer. The water, just a bit more chloride than I usually do, just to give that a malty flavor, malty boost. Very simple. I'll give the water profile down here. And then the yeast is really tricky. So you have a liquid yeast, that is the McEwan's yeast, White Labs 28 or Y yeast 1728. And Gozdawa is a yeast manufacturer that have dry yeast only, but some of their own unique yeasts. So they're promoting a strain from Alloa, a different town than all the other yeasts that I know of from Scotland. And so there's a bit of variety to be gained there. What I did was I used this a year ago for a Scottish stout, and then this year for the Scottish bitter, and I reused that same yeast that I harvested a year ago. So very low vitality. Put it through 2 starters just to make sure that I get a good amount of yeast. I think half a liter of starter in the end for the 15-liter brew that I did. And then I was certain that I had fresh yeast that acted as if it was liquid yeast and not dry yeast, because none of the cells was still alive that remembered how it was to be dried. And that is one of the parameters that people say is necessary to get a good flavor out of dry yeast. You need to harvest it, propagate it, and then you get something that gives good aroma. So low pitching rate and liquid kind of yeast from this Alloa type brewery, so different Scottish ale. It gives a very similar profile to the White Labs 28 in the terms that it has these sherry undertones, very delicate, complex fruitiness, not one single fruit that you notice a lot, but it is different in my opinion from those liquid yeasts. So it's definitely worth a try, and I'm very happy with it. So the character of this beer, even though it has a low percentage of alcohol, very little that gives flavor from the basic ingredients, malt and hops, it's really nice. And it's very mouth-filling. Now, of course, if you draw through sparkler, you can see it's still, after all this talking, still lots of foam there, very lacy. And yeah, just amazing foam stability and everything. And the yeast just gives you all the flavor that you need for something that has this low original gravity. So the crystal malt I used was crisp Crystal 100, which is not the one I would recommend. I would recommend Crystal 150, which is the standard in the UK. But that's what I had at hand in a large amount. And it does give a clear caramel note, but not that intense as the 150. It's a bit more reluctant to show itself as something that is actually caramel. It's a bit more grainy. It's very far away from dried fruits. Crisp doesn't really do dried fruits in their crystal. That's something you get more from Warminster, and of course all the German brands, they are really fruit forward. And here you still get some dried fruits from the yeast, I think. So that's the contribution of the yeast. Some pear from the East Kent Golding, some grassiness from the Fuggle. Just very interesting, very complex smell. So the smell really doesn't hint at 8 degree Plato 1032 original gravity. The foam is really important. If you have a nitro setup, that's what Belhaven uses, that is really good. Or put it through with a hand pump through sparkler. That's also very nice. And that gives you a foam that creates a mouthfeel that is noticeable. If you wait long enough, the foam will disappear and these last sips will taste watery, just because there is not much in there that supports a good mouthfeel. So the flavor is quite reluctant to show itself. It is quite watery, but it gets covered by the mouthfeel of the foam. There is some maltiness, but Golden Promise cannot really shine because you need a higher original gravity to really show Golden Promise as something that you like. The crystal does help. You have a bit of aroma from the toasted, not really caramel, but like bready, toasty flavors like that, slightly burnt, that are in there that really help give something. And then you have the hops, which are also very good in there. Some decent, just very slightly giving some fruits, and I find it actually quite grassy, which might be that because I used very old Branding Cross for bittering, but I think it is the Fuggle. Fuggle can sometimes be a bit grassy. So that was the video then, I would say, and see you next time when we brew something live and you see what I'm brewing. Until then, bye bye.